much, John. John, have a pumpkin sticker. By gum. Okay, here we go. Recording. Start recording. I have survived the hurricane. Thank you very much. It just drizzled relentlessly it's almost quit. I hope you guys are safe. Without any further fooling around, here we go. Start recording, play the theme.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society.
You're in violation of secure communication procedures, Commodore.
So we just went ahead and fixed the glitch.
There is no America. There is no democracy.
Our fifth objective, a new world order.
There are no nations. There are no peoples. There are no Russians. There are no Arabs. There are no third worlds. There is no West.
Right-wing conspiracy.
What do you call it when the assassins accuse the assassin?
A new world order.
Thank you for plugging in to the Stones Unturned podcast.
Well, just a second there, Professor. We fixed the glitch.
I'm your host, Professor Thomas Henry Horan.
He reads everything.
Hello there, my beautiful, bountiful, bodacious boosters. You better bet your bippies he reads everything. Let me show you why. Earlier we talked about how Jim and Darlene, right? Darlene Ferrin and Mike Mageau, two of the Zodiac victims, and it turns out that the more you know about the victims, the more you know about the motive and therefore the perpetrator, right? So all this stuff about Jim and Darlene, I'm continuing to upload those episodes to the members-only YouTube. In the meantime, if you are already subscribed, you can't subscribe anymore. It's going away. The premium website has those episodes already on it. I'll get those uploaded over the next few weeks, in addition to the rest of the 13 episodes on the phony Lindbergh baby kidnapping, which has everything in the world to do with Zodiac. Once again, here's one of the things that's interesting about David and Betty Lou is that supposedly they just met at school. This was their first date, but it turns out their families have probably known each other since long before the kids were born. Same thing about Brian and Cecilia. Supposedly they met at college, but that's not true. Their families go back a long way. Why in both of these cases would they keep that a secret? There's this myth of the Zodiac Killer that says this was a guy who just drove around and noticed a possible random victim and would just attack. No. For one thing, nobody has that kind of luck because these victims were not attacked in lonely, isolated, rural lovers' lanes. They were attacked in very, very busy places. David and Betty Lou weren't even off the highway. If you go out to that pump station and you access that road that goes back behind the refinery as well, and there's some other facilities, county facilities and things down that road, you can barely get your car off the road. You can barely park. I think we could just about squeeze 3 cars side by side in front of that gate, but really only room for 2 cars side by side. When you look at those crime scene photographs from Lake Herman Road, it's a very wide angle lens, and he's standing in the opposite ditch. You see the road and all of that. You see that was not a lover's lane. And Blue Rock Springs Park on a Friday night, let alone a Saturday night, let alone the 4th of July, there were cars in and out of that lot constantly, including 2 on-duty undercover narcotics officers who both claimed they were in that parking lot at the time that Darlene and Mike were getting shot, and they both claimed they never saw Darlene's car there. This is not just the luckiest serial killer ever. This is it's no way. There is no way he just randomly, here's an opportunity, and nobody came along. He chooses to spend a long time with Brian and Cecilia, doesn't get interrupted. If he had chosen to spend another 30 to 60 seconds at the Blue Rock Springs or Lake Herman Road crime scenes, he would have been caught. He would have been seen. That's not luck. Once, maybe, is luck. Not twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. There is no way this is luck. These are planned. These are basically mafia hits. And it's not so much the kids being the target. Once again, just like Son of Sam, it's the parents. So, who are the parents of Brian and Cecilia, and how did they really meet? We'll start with Brian. And then at the end of this episode, I'm going to kind of redo the Betty Lou Jensen part. I didn't do a very good job. But instead of deleting that and re-uploading it, I'm just going to do a better job. And it kind of fits in a little better with this couple here. So without further ado, Brian's father, both Brian and Cecilia were raised Seventh-day Adventist, which comes out of that Second Great Awakening, which is all related, Mormon, Seventh-day Adventist, Jehovah's Witnesses. They start off together and they very quickly go off in different directions. They are all of this Second Great Awakening has everything to do with Swedenborgism, which had the first wave of Swedenborgism had a lot to do with the Reformed Presbyterian Church and the Reformed Methodist Church. They are raised Seventh-day Adventists. It's traditional in the SDA to become doctors, nurses, park rangers, right? Remember, Dennis Land was raised Seventh-day Adventist. And they're thick on the ground up there. If you go up to the North Bay Area, you can't swing a dead cat without hitting a Seventh-day Adventist. And God bless them. They're wonderful people. If I had to choose between Mormons, Jehovah's Witnesses, and Seventh-day Adventists, I would probably want to live next door to an Adventist. They have excellent medical schools. It's all scientific. It's not quackery. There's nothing quackery about them. They're just really, really good medical schools. They're really dedicated to service, and they're kind of into that whole nature is a church. So a park ranger is also doing God's work. So who are these people? His father, Brian Calvin Hartnell's father, was V. Calvin Hartnell. I don't know if Victor Calvin Hartnell, I think. They are Calvinist in their way. The Methodists, the Reformed Methodists are more Calvinist. But that church that Arliss Perry's father planted in Bismarck, that was like Fourth Great Awakening, the 50s, 1957, reforming the Presbyterian Church, Methodist Church, and that's like a Swedenborg revival. This is where it gets into this dangerous Gnosticism. So, who is Victor Calvin Hartnell? In 1950, he is a pastor in Roseburg, Oregon, I'm sorry. This is way out in the middle of nowhere, but they like it. They like living out in the wild places. A lot of these ranchers, orchard, a lot of them are SDA. So this high mountain plateau that runs from Canada down through Oregon, Washington, California, that's where they like to live. Kind of like the Mormons living in their little valley there in Utah. In 1940, he was living in Bellingham, Washington. Now, I'm going to come back to that in a second. In 1950, he's living and doing pastoral work in Roseburg. And just up the road, and up in Oregon, 72 miles is practically around the block. Just around the corner. That's Jim Douglas Crabtree, who lived on Darlene Lane in Eugene, Oregon. Does that mean he knew the Hartnells? Not necessarily. But we're going to come back to Bellingham, Washington in just a second. So he's a minister. Before that, he works on bridge construction. So that's probably what he's doing in Bellingham and working on those big bridges up there. And he's a timekeeper. So you know how it is when you're a pastor. Sometimes you need a job. Pastoral work it's hard to get a full-time job in any church, really. A lot of pastors have to have a job, have to have a side hustle to pay the bills. So in 1940, he's in Bellingham. But in 1950, he's in Roseburg, probably his first real parish, his first real parsonage. Well, his grandfather, okay, I'm sorry. So So Victor's father, John Irving Hartnell, was involved in bridge construction. So they would have moved a lot. And remember, there are a couple other of these families. It's all about road construction, bridge construction, especially leading up to and during World War II. All this WPA stuff going from Washington, D.C. all the way out to California. Remember, that has a lot to do with it. And has a lot to do with Charles Manson even. Okay, we'll be coming back around to that. If you don't remember, it's okay. But I thought this was interesting. But it's nothing unusual for Brian's father or grandfather to be involved, pastoral work, things like this. His mother, Catherine, was born in Napa. Nobody said a fucking word about that. Have they? Have they ever said anything about Brian's mother being from Napa? Paul Stein's brother lived in both Vallejo and Napa right before Paul got shot. Their parents were divorced or something. So Paul's brother, that wasn't Leo. What's his name? The one that went on TV and he had the scratches on his face and looks exactly like the sketch. I mean, it could have been him. It could have been him. There's some kind of bad blood in that family we'll never know about. But his brother, Joe, was it Joe? Lived in both Napa and Vallejo in like 66, 67, 68. And in 69, he had just moved to Modesto when Paul got shot. She is born in Napa in 1923. This says marriage date July 1st, 1946, and Brian was born July 1st, 1946. But it was registered at the courthouse July 1st, 1946. Now, here's the thing. A lot of these religious groups don't celebrate their birthdays because this is a dead giveaway that they're Gnostic, and I'll tell you why. And this is a dead giveaway that this is Swedenborgism, even though if you ask these people, they probably never heard of Emanuel Swedenborg. But he's a guy who invents ancient astronauts. He invents all of this crap. They don't celebrate their birthdays because you were born in hell. Earth is the fourth hell. The sun is the hell. Mercury is the first. Venus is the third. Earth is the fourth hell. You have been working your way up. You've been reincarnated and you have worked your way up through the planets. Now you're born in Earth, but Earth is still hell in case you haven't noticed. So they do not celebrate their birthdays. They do, however, celebrate their wedding anniversaries. So, well, Brian, as you know, you won't be getting any presents or cards on your birthday, but your mother and I would like a new set of silverware. We don't owe you any presents, but you owe us presents. There will be a celebration. Welcome, everybody, to our anniversary dinner. This is not, I just want to clarify, this is not Brian's birthday. This is our anniversary. It looks like the marriage actually took place on June 24th or something, but it was registered in the county records on July 1st, 1946. He was born 49. And by the way, you interrupted our third wedding anniversary. I don't know. People's lives are so amazing. Do you ever read a newspaper? Just read an old newspaper. Just read the whole thing from 50 years ago, 70 years ago. There'll be some big story. Men landing on the moon. Then there'll be like 5 other stories that'll just blow your mind. All happened on the same day. You forget all about it. You watch these documentaries. I just watched a documentary about, not just the one about Barry Seal. There was another one. About Olam Polly. There's a documentary about Olam Polly. It's very narrowly focused, and it skips over all the best stuff. But this was one of those houses where the Grateful Dead would... And the Grateful Dead are pretty spooky. Don't forget that. You're wondering, how did a band that lame get that famous? If you've never heard their music, don't bother. They made a studio album in the 80s that was not bad, but because a lot of them wanted, they needed money to retire on. There's a band in your town that's been around forever, members come and go. They're almost good. Okay? They're almost good. If you're drunk enough or you've had 3 or 4 tabs of acid. They're almost good, but they were never good. They made one decent studio album in the 80s, and there were a couple of live, they always recorded their live performances and let other people do it. They admitted they were more of an experiment than a professional band. But how did a band that lame get that good? Well, for the same reason that a really good band like the Police, right, the Copeland, got famous, because they're part of these intelligence agency propaganda machines, experiments, and things like that. Blue Oyster Cult, possibly like Linkin Park, but definitely like Charles Manson. Probably some spooks hanging around Jefferson Airplane, a good band from San Francisco. They were a good band. I don't like any of their songs. But they were a band. They were a good band. The Grateful Dead, the Jerry Garcia band, that's a band you might pay $10 to go see. But the Grateful Dead is that band that your friend joined like the day after he graduated high school, and they've been rehearsing in his dad's garage for 10 years, and they're still not really all that good. The biggest problem they had was, number one, they had no singer. Like the Doors. The Doors were a garage band that fell ass backward into a world-class singer, or at least, a vocal stylist. Grateful Dead never had a singer. Grateful Dead never had a drummer worth a shit. They couldn't keep time for shit. The only reason I bring it up is because this Olam Polly was a mansion up not that far from where Jim and his wife, his old lady Shirley, were living. Okay, near Santa Cruz, a little bit north of Santa Cruz. Olam Polly was a house. These people got rich and they built a mansion, and they built it over. They preserved what was left of the original Adobe Rancho that had been there since like 1699 or something. So this is another one of those little experimental hippie communes, and we'll go through these one by one, or we'll go through them all in an episode. Each commune did one thing uniquely different from all the others, and each commune had a spook living there, and spooks in and out. So Olam Polly is an interesting documentary that you can watch. Was it on Netflix or something? Maybe it was on Doc Club. Maybe it's on Doc Club. Documentary Club. But the point is, this is not that far from where Jim and Shirley were shacking up. And a lot of other things that go on in that documentary. Well, the Grateful Dead lived there for a few months and practiced there, which would have driven me insane. There's nothing worse. I've been a music journalist, blah, 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 blah. When you have a roommate who's learning to play an instrument and never gets good at it, to have to listen to the Grateful Dead rehearse I would have killed them all. I would have just killed them all. It drives me nuts. If you can't keep time and you can't stay on key, I will wipe you out. So after so many hours of this, I will wipe you out. So this matters because Brian's parents were married they were living in Bellingham, Washington. A wedding of interest here. The Bellingham Herald. A wedding of interest here took place Monday, June 24th, 1946, at the Wee Kirk of the Heather in Forest Lawn, Glendale, California. This is going to matter a lot when we get to Cecilia Shepard. Her family has deep roots in Glendale. So Brian's parents got married in Glendale at the Wee Kirk of the Heather, which is a very famous wedding chapel. They have one in Las Vegas. You might have gotten married at the Wee Kirk of the Heather wedding chapel. This is a famous church. It's actually a lot bigger than this. This is their little wedding chapel. You don't have to be Presbyterian. You can just get married there anytime, like Vegas. This is a big, beautiful church and a big, beautiful church campus. But they have this is their old original little chapel, and people get married there. They get married there to this day. Why did they go all the way to Glendale? Well, it's funny. The Shepherds have a lot of roots around Glendale. Hi, Gary. When Catherine Leary Walker, daughter of Mrs. J.J. Walker of Glendale, Okay, the Walkers are from Glendale. Became the bride of Calvin Virgil Hartnell, son of Mr. and Mrs. J.I. Hartnell of Bellingham, Washington. So Brian's father's parents live in Bellingham, Washington. Brian's father marries a Miss Walker from Glendale. Are you with me? Elder Mervyn Adams of the Seventh-day Adventist Church of Reno, Nevada. This was the slide I knew I forgot to make. I'll come back to it again when we talk about Donna Lass. And to make a long story short, they brought an SDA minister from Reno, Nevada to Glendale, California to perform a wedding. They will spend the summer in Glendale and will return to Walla Walla, Washington. Walla Walla is way out east on that high mountain desert plateau. Walla Walla, Washington is in the dead center of nowhere. You can't even get to Podunk from there. If you've ever been to Walla Walla. And the groom, a former student at apparently Walla Walla University, they bring a minister from Reno, Nevada. I forgot to make the slide. Remember, Jim had a brother who lived in... No, I do have this slide. This is the slide right here. No, it's not. Let me bounce around. Okay, this is Jim's brother, Donald, who lived in Reno. Told reporting officer Jim is involved with narcotics, believed he's living on a ranch in the Watsonville, Santa Cruz area, but he didn't live at Olompali, but he could have easily visited. States he doesn't have any handwriting exemplars of Jim's, believes that Jim is wanted by the Watsonville, California police for writing bum checks, also believes Jim has written bum checks in the Lake Tahoe, Reno area. Yes, he had. But Jim, when he was around, he would stay with his brothers. He had 4 brothers, and at least 2 of them. The one in Reno and the one in Riverside. Otis. This is Donald Phillips, Jim's brother, lived in Reno. Well, the funny thing is, not only did Jim live in Eugene, Oregon, which is a few miles from that little town out in the middle of nowhere, but he also lived in Seattle, and then there's an island just across the bay from Seattle called Bainbridge Island. He used to live like a woodsman. That's 100 miles from Bellingham, but he spent a lot of time. And Jim had family around there. And Bellingham, of course, is just south of the Canadian border. So you've got Brian and Cecilia, who supposedly have no connection. It's just a fluke they were at Lake Berryessa. That wasn't a fluke whatsoever. Her grandmother lived in, or her mother was from, her grandparents lived in Napa, or Napa County. That's not a coincidence. And it seems like Jim crosses paths with them a lot. Maybe. Not just before the murder. I'm thinking more likely after the murder. Why? Because to keep Brian's mouth shut. I thought it was real funny that Brian would talk a lot when he was in the hospital, and then he just stopped talking. And don't forget, he and Cecilia were attacked on Melody Jensen's 25th birthday. She was born September 27th, 1944, and she never talked. She finally talked to Andrew Knock from our documentary, Myth of the Zodiac Killer. I don't know how much of that... I remember what he told me, but she never mentioned that she was born. That was her birthday. But I can guarantee you this. She would have noticed on her 25th birthday another Zodiac attack. She would have noticed that for sure. And don't forget, Zodiac had taken credit for her sister's murder just a few weeks before, 7-8 weeks before the Lake Berryessa attack. And that attacker at Lake Berryessa took bizarre measures to make sure the newspapers would report it as a Zodiac attack without writing a letter to the newspapers. We will come back to this, But just keep this in mind. That's a very strange coincidence. How could? Well, that might explain why he chose random victims at Lake Berryessa. He just wanted to carry off an attack on September 27th to remind Melody to keep her mouth shut. Keep her mouth shut about what? How about where Betty Lou and David were for the hour and a half that nobody knows where they were? Who knows? We'll never know, and Melody obviously isn't going to say. But all of a sudden, it isn't just that these victims have a connection and it's mostly through their parents. All of a sudden, these victims have a lot of connections to Jim Crabtree. Whether he actually committed any murders or not, I doubt. But he may have shot Paul Stine. He did pretty much match the description of the Stine shooter. Does this prove a heck of a lot? Not necessarily. But Brian's parents were married by an SDA minister that they brought all the way down from Reno, Nevada? I haven't had a chance to really check into this yet. Okay. And then Jim and Darlene were supposedly married in Reno and supposedly divorced in Reno. They weren't legally married. Now here's another thing. This marriage that takes place, this wedding that takes place between Brian's parents takes place on June 24th, but it's not registered. According to the county records, it was July 1st, which turns out to be later Brian's birthday. I know, growing up in little country towns, that sometimes marriages and births didn't get recorded for several days. But in Glendale, California, was this not a really legal marriage? Did they not have a marriage license for this? Because there is no marriage license for Jim and Darlene, and there are no divorce records. Darlene's sister, Linda, got married in Reno and divorced in Reno. But there are records for that. Same period of time. Cover the exact same period of time, late 60s to 71, 72. There's no record of Jim and Darlene getting married. But they showed Mr. and Mrs. Suennen a marriage certificate, like the one that Brian's parents would have received on June 24th. Then they probably went to the courthouse and filed. You know, some of these religious groups they're not real down with the government, the imperial government. A lot of them are not. A lot of them are not. The Amish, for example. Not that I can blame them. I find no fault in that. Were Jim and Darlene married by the exact same minister? Has anybody ever seen a copy of this? They showed it to the cops, but there's no record of Jim and Darlene ever being married or divorced. But they were supposedly married and divorced in Reno. I thought that's an interesting coincidence. Doesn't prove anything. No, the bride is a senior student at Walla Walla University. Okay. Mother has marriage license which shows couple was married in Reno, Nevada, January 1st, 1966. Did not hear from her again till October 66 when she returned home with her husband, James T. Phillips. They wouldn't let him stay in the house, so he goes to Riverside, stays with his brother Otis, and a couple weeks later, while he's living there, is when Sherry Jo Bates is murdered, by coincidence. Worked at final divorce decree, Reno, Nevada, June 2nd, 1967. Records show final divorce decree? Nope, I couldn't find them anywhere. Even if they were legally married, was it the same minister? Donald Phillips of Redding, salesman for 11 years, California State. We talked about that. Don't need to see that clip. That's repetitive. Alva G. Walker was also a clergyman from Seattle, Washington. So these people know each other. These people know each other. Brian's uncle James, A discussion on seasonal changes in supply and demand for livestock and their effect on market trends will be led at the meeting by James Hartnell, Regional Supervisor of the Livestock and Meat Market News of the United States Department of Agriculture. He does almost the exact same job as Herb Clutter, analyzing and guiding and influencing crop prices, livestock prices, going to the banks and saying the Department of Agriculture wants to grow a lot more. What the hell do they grow out there? We need more dairy and less meat. So let's structure loans that way. Let's create price incentives. Let's do all the things we can do to do this. It's not quite like Gosplan. It's not quite like the Soviet Union where they just say, but this is one of many organizations, and now this is after the war. This is 1950 when they're getting very active. He does almost the exact same job. I thought that was interesting. Oh, and by the way, this is over by Santa Rosa, right? Press Democrat. This is Santa Rosa Press Democrat. So he's got relatives over by Santa Rosa, where the Santa Rosa hitchhiker slayers never caught either. What's this got to do with Cecilia Ann Shepard? There's a lot less about them because she was born in India, near Bangalore, and her parents were born in India. They're missionaries. They're Seventh-day Adventist missionaries in India for several generations. So what? Madame Blavatsky, whose cults reach deep into all of these Reformed Christian groups, it's the same idea. It's the same basic Gnosticism. And she's really cashing in on Swedenborgism. Really cashes in on Swedenborgism, spreading across England and the United States. She moved to India. And all of this Bhagwan Rajneesh, blah, 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 the Beatle, all of these con artists. There's another documentary, Wild Country or Wild Wild Country, up in Oregon. They're all come from Blavatsky and what's his name moved to India and started selling them on the idea of going to England and America and passing themselves off as gurus to these people. I only mention that because the Shepherds spent generations in India. There's her father, Robert, birthplace, Bangalore. There's not much on them because they don't spend much time in America. Their permanent address is Glendale, California, where Brian's parents got married. And, of course, the Seventh-day Adventist community there. Glendale is across the street from the Skunk Works. Don't forget that. Glendale, Burbank. Here's the Skunk Works. Here's Glendale. Here's Burbank. They're right there. Well, I'm showing it to you backwards. Here's, you know what I'm talking about. Glendale is right there. So here they are, going back and forth to India. But the girls are born, she also has a sister. Cecilia is born in India. She has two sisters, Kathleen and Carolyn. Now, here's where it gets interesting. 1958, 2nd June 1959. June 2nd, 1959. They're on their way back from India. And they arrive in New York City, and one of their fellow passengers from Sacramento, California, is named Walter Ott. Is he Wally Ott? Is he the father of our David Wally Ott? And the reason I ask is because, never mind. You know about Wally Ott. I'm not saying this proves a damn thing. I'm saying it's really, really funny. There's a Wally Ott who's on the boat with them when they come back from India in 1959. They've been gone for 6 years. They come back with a Wally Ott of Sacramento, California. That's right, Channel. She was descended from Viking merchants. She was a Viking. Her father was a Viking. 1947, La Sierra College, Arlington, California. I'm sorry, yearbook date 1966, La Sierra College. 1967, La Sierra College, Arlington, California. 1969, Pacific Union College, Angwin, California. But their families have known each other a long time. They didn't just meet at college. Something else about her, did anybody notice? She was a singer. She was like an operatically trained singer. Did anybody ever mention that? Well, anyway, her father, an SDA missionary in eastern India near Bangladesh, when he retired from missionary work, became a mathematics and physics teacher at Loma Linda Academy. Remember, we talked about Loma Linda Academy. We talked about Loma Linda and what went on, and who were the math and physics students were at Loma Linda Academy. I will come back to that when the time comes. Check your notes. You made notes about Loma Linda Academy and Loma Linda University, right? She's survived by her parents and a younger sister, Caroline of Loma Linda, an older sister of Guadalajara, Mexico. Her husband is a sophomore medical student at the in Mexico. Remember when Michelle Phillips and her sister lived with their father in Mexico while he went to school to be a sociologist? Guadalajara, Mexico. Where is that? That's not really anywhere near. Yes, it is. Here's Guanajuato, and here's Guadalajara. Right? This area, now, from Guadalajara to Irapuato. Let's try that. Guadalajara to Irapuato. How far is that? 280 kilometers, 260 kilometers, 180 miles. Not that big of a coincidence. The Lyle C. Shepherds of Oakhurst and the Rossier Thompsons of Yucaipa. Two uncles, Dr. Byron Elder of Loma Linda and Calvin Shepherd of Omaha, Nebraska. We're going to come back to Omaha, Nebraska in just 1 second. Dr. Byron Elder of and Calvin Shepherd of Omaha. And Mabel Folks of Los Angeles. Not Fawkes as in... And Brian was going to school in Troutdale, Oregon at the time. Troutdale, Oregon. Open maps. Open in maps. That's on the border. Portland, Vancouver, Washington. That's right up on the... Jim lived in Lincoln City, Oregon, and Eugene, Oregon. So Lincoln City, can you even see that? Probably not. Eugene, Lincoln City. Okay, are you getting the point? Am I making my point? Cecilia's funeral will be conducted by Robert W. Olson, chairman of the PUC Religion Department, who was a dormitory roommate of her father on this college campus in the 1940s. He attended Pacific Union College, and his roommate officiated at her funeral. A fatal afternoon of reminiscences. That's not what's going on at all. This wasn't a chance meeting. This was not a chance meeting with a killer. There was nothing chance about any of this. And there's no chance about the date either. We're coming right back. That's why I'm talking. That's why I'm going to just do the Betty. I'll do the whole Betty Lou thing all over again because that was kind of short. So Cecilia's mother, Wilma Dolores Eller, born July 7th, 1923. She passed away in Reading. Reading is where Jim's father, Diamond Bell Phillips, lived the last so many years of his life. It would have been very easy for Jim to keep tabs on Brian and Cecilia's, Brian and their survivors. Very easy for Jim to keep. And that might explain why he kept traveling to places like Bellingham and had an address in Bellingham. Was because he was keeping tabs on these people, making sure they keep their mouth shut. And they've kept their mouth shut for 50 years. Nobody's talked for 50 years. Cecilia's family never talked. I didn't even know she had sisters till I started this podcast. She passed away in 2006. She was born in Merced. Moved to Shasta County in 1993 from Loma Linda. Administrative Secretary for the General Conference of the Seventh-day Adventist Church in Washington, D.C., and a member of the Seventh-day Adventist Church in Whitmore. I think they did live for a while in Washington, D.C. It looks like her parents actually got divorced in 1968. Divorce among Seventh-day Adventists? Is this why? And all the evidence seems to indicate that Brian and Cecilia did have sex on the beach that day, or tried to. It's not always easy. Not when you're being stabbed in the back. But that seemed like a little bit loose for Seventh-day Adventists. Because sunset, that was Sunday, right? That's the holiest hour of the week for Seventh-day Adventists. But you know, young people are romantic. Maybe that's why they did it. Maybe it was an act of rebellion. Because the funny thing is, Park Ranger Dennis Land, although raised Seventh-day Adventist, was not the marrying kind and had a big grudge against the church. It was a big split with his family, his whole entire adult life. He was only close to his grandfather. His grandfather was not raised SDA. His grandmother was SDA and raised his parents SDA. Raised his dad SDA or whatever. But Dennis was not. And he didn't like the church, and probably because he was probably gay. And they would frown on that. Looks like Cecilia's parents got divorced April 1968. Whatever that works. Sunset Saturday? Okay, yeah. That was the holiest hour of the week. Were they pink? This is a play that was put on, this is in Pasadena. Will be portrayed in a playlet to be presented by the First Congregational Church, very, very close, right? Congregationalists, that's like First Great Awakening is Congregationalists. Young people at the Pasadena Disarmament Conference, 1932, including Bob Shepard. Could be. Seventh-day Adventists would be peace. I mean, they're conscientious objectors, just like Jehovah's Witnesses. That was a big case. The Jehovah's Witnesses was a big case. And a disarmament conference. So were they considered a little pink? Well, he was born in Bangalore, 1921. This is Robert Shepard, School, Pacific Union College, 1943. He worked his way through college as a gardener. This is Riverside, California, So this is Loma Linda. He's at Loma Linda, probably. He's a gardener on college grounds, or he works at Loma Linda University, probably. See what I'm saying? There's nothing random about any of this. It's all directly connected. Here's where it gets interesting. Well, not that interesting. He worked for a doctor. When he registered for the draft, he was living in Glendale, and he worked for Dr. John W. Hopkins. This is John W. Hopkins. Once again, a very modest headstone. Very modest headstone. He's a physician in a hospital in Glendale in 1930. He was born in Minnesota in 1873. I don't know how important any of this is. He just looked like a typical, maybe he was training to be a doctor or whatever. This is Cecilia's father, Robert Highland Shepherd. Place of birth, Lady Curzon Hospital, Bangalore, India. Missionary, parents are involved in missionary work. Irene Elizabeth Cutler Shepherd. She was born in Dodgeville, Wisconsin. Oh, there was one more thing. He worked at an aircraft plant. Why? Where is that slide? Maybe I will find that really quick. He worked at an aircraft plant at the beginning of the war. Not that that necessarily matters, but he worked at an aircraft plant. I think did he work at Curtiss-Wright? Let me look that up really quick. Well, I got you here. Then I will get to the Betty Lou Jensen stuff, and then I'll let you go. I know what I need to do. Hold on. I know I got it someplace. Where is it? There it is. Get to be my age, your finger doesn't always want to triple click on that mouse. Bet everything you have on the Broncos today. I don't know why, but just do it. You're probably 14 points behind already. Where the hell is he? Robert Highland Shepherd. God damn it. Pardon my language. There he is. Consular report of birth. At one point, he worked at an aircraft factory, and I forgot to put, is that here? He's a boarder. He's a student in this house. What does he do? Nope, he's a gardener at a college. At one point, he did work at an aircraft plant. Because here he works for Dr. Hopkins. Maybe I'll let that go for today, and I will show you. Well, I'll come back to this actual murder case, and I will show you. He didn't work there very long, but who knows who he might have met there. Whom he may have met there. Just can't. Voter registrations, yearbooks. Bob Shepherd, that's when he's in that play. City Director, Reverend Robert H. Shepherd, Glendale, California. Where did I see it? It's possible it's not him. Maybe I didn't finish the slide because it's possible it's not him. I won't worry about that right now. Well, where's all the stuff on Betty Lou? Fine, let me open that one. Okay. Let me run through this again. So she's born outside Pueblo, Colorado. I'm going to get to the one thing that I want you to see today. Thomas Faraday's, David Faraday's parents met and married in Omaha, Nebraska. James Dudley Ramsey, or J. Dudley Ramsey, born in Omaha, Nebraska, worked for his father at Prudential Insurance. Braniff International Airways, where text through bags in Dallas, had, in April 1957, official airline guide shows 42 scheduled airline departures per day. This is in Omaha, Nebraska, by Braniff International Airways. This is Omaha, Nebraska, 1957. Did he ever work there? Did anybody else ever work there? Jim lived in Honolulu, Hawaii. Fleet White Sr. Fleet White Sr. worked pipeline and petroleum tank batteries on Honolulu, and David Faraday's father did the exact same thing for PG&E on Treasure Island, apparently. And Cecilia had an uncle who lived in Omaha, Nebraska. Huh. Does that prove anything right out completely? No. Her father, Betty Lou's father, right, worked at Otis Elevator Company. There we go. Okay? Is that about as clear as mud for today? I hope so, because this is all you're getting. I will see you in a couple of days. Remember, Thursday night, I will be on what's his name? Walter Bosley's YouTube channel. We're going to talk about Arliss Perry. There was something about Arliss Perry. Wait a minute. What the hell? Where the hell did I put those slides? This is why I'm going to do several episodes a week instead of trying to do a perfect episode, because there was stuff about Arliss Perry that also had something to do with this. Where did I put those? There was something about Arliss Perry. Let me open this one up one more time. Did I copy and paste this crap twice? Instead of pasting it into the right. But it was about David Faraday's step-grandfather being an insurance adjuster. Butte, Montana. This was it. I will show you. Okay, this is something different, but you need to see. Speaking of Butte, Montana, okay? And speaking of Faraday's, maybe I'll show it to you right now. Here's the thing from current slide. Okay. He was an insurance adjuster in Butte, Montana. Remember when I was talking about this guy organizing the farm workers in this loose connection? Well, the thing is, he was born in Butte, Montana, and he became a big labor agitator, big labor organizer in the aerospace industry, including, but not limited to, and he was going to start a helter-skelter. Largo is a designation of the Liberation Army of Revolutionary Group Organizations, a fighting force of men and women dedicated to the overthrow of the United States government by the use of force. After March 1970, a fully trained, equipped manned army of revolution will be operating in Northern California, just like Charlie and them were supposed to be. Well, he was born in Butte, Montana, and he was a big labor organizer at Lockheed and a lot of the companies that were absorbed by Lockheed. Mr. Parente Ramos trained as a machinist but went to work for the Agricultural Workers Organizing Committee in the 50s. Later, he helped organize 50,000 machinists and other workers at Boeing, Lockheed, and other aerospace companies. Signed up machinists, miners, and aerospace workers from New York to Texas and California. And McKinley had been... Okay, are you with me? I think that's pretty much it. And I think he might be tied to those burglaries that happened in San Francisco. Okay? How the hell does this keep happening? Why does it stop? I just want to play the fucking theme. There we go. Well, thank you for your patience. If this isn't worth $10 a month, I don't know what the hell is. I'll be on Walter Bosley's channel Thursday, and if you don't see me, I'll be live streaming before then. Who knows? Maybe I'll get this episode put together. Are you with me? These victims are connected from way back. And I think it has an awful lot to do with the motives of the murders. And I just thought it was fascinating that there comes Jim Douglas Crabtree. James Douglas Phillips Crabtree. I need a cliffhanger. What's the cliffhanger? What's the next episode going to be about? What does this have to do with the murder of Paul Stein? Everybody. I'm Professor Thomas Henry Horan, asking you to please stay plugged in to the Stones Unturned podcast.
He reads everything.
Thanks, guys. I'll see you in a couple days.